Welcome back, everyone. It's another roundup episode. That means I've got 3 stories, and to guide us through those stories, 3 numbers. The first is 2. 2 hours, that is the number that defines Steam's refund policy, but as of this week, well, those 2 hours will actually start sooner because Valve have closed a loophole. The next, 2019. That is the year that Frontier Developments promised their players that their new premium currency would not fund pay-to-win purchases. But in 2024, that may no longer be the case. And finally, 30. That is the number of publishers that developer Flaming Fowl Studios were refused by after their funding was pulled. And that means that even though they just dropped the demo of their game on Steam, well, they've had to cancel development on that game for now and have had to lay off their staff. Crazy stuff in this industry right now, where a lot of studios are just finding, studios big and small, that money is drying up. And that actually is going to mean there's a lot of games that we will not be getting. But what we will be getting, today's sponsor. Whose impact I certainly felt personally. So, ZBiotics is the world's first bioengineered probiotic for rough post-night out mornings. It is a pre-alcohol probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And basically, when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct called acetaldehyde in the gut. And this byproduct, not dehydration, that is what's to blame for the rough next day. So, ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break that byproduct down and assist your body in catching up. Just remember to drink the probiotic before drinking alcohol, to drink responsibly, and to get a good night's sleep for your best tomorrow. And ultimately, I decided to go ahead with them because my experience has been great. Basically, I drank ZBiotics. I had a few pints, enough that certainly, now that I'm almost 30, I would absolutely feel it the next morning. So I used ZBiotics. I shifted work forward an hour so that I would still get enough sleep, which is very important, and I was really surprised with how much I was able to get done the next day. So ultimately, I'm happy to add this as a tool to my belt, and if you're interested, go to zbiotics.com/Bellular or just scan this QR code on the screen to get 15% off your first order when you use code Bellular at checkout, and that code also works with a subscription so you can stay prepared. And in addition to having a good experience myself, the other reason why I went with them is that they do have a 100% zero questions asked money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will just refund all of your money back without asking any questions. zbiotics.com/Bellular. Use the code Bellular for 15% off. Thanks for the sponsorship. I think this is a really dope product. Most importantly of all, though, do drink responsibly. With that said, let's go. Let's talk about Steam first. So, whenever they formalized early access, they really did just set up a thing that the whole industry would be following. And now they're responding to the newest marketing trend of advanced access. So yes, there was early access and there was also advanced access. Steam Advanced Access is now the process of providing several days of early access to people who pre-order a certain edition of a video game. Now, of course, regardless of how you or me may think about this, where, I think it's obviously pretty damn bad, but from the publisher side, what this basically is Steam now recognizing something that is a very, very common trend. I mean, it's pretty much cropping up everywhere now, right? And that means that Valve has got to deal with it because it's going to be happening on their storefront. So now, in order to, from their perspective, protect both the interests of their audience and also people selling on their platform, they've made new rules. So, on the former, the way that Steam would interact with this policy was actively bad for audience knowledge. Here's an example. If you look at a page for any game on launch day, you'll see reviews. On games where advanced access was in play, up until now, you couldn't leave reviews. So people would have early access to a game, but they wouldn't be able to drop reviews for that game until the real official release date where all the other punters get in. So that basically means that people could pay extra money for advanced access, but when doing that, they would lack the key information of user reviews because those user reviews weren't allowed. So if servers were broken or just there was anything they should know that would usually be flagged to somebody by, say, a mixed review on launch day, that didn't happen. But now that's changed. And you might have already noticed it on Steam itself. There's a new visual flair that ensures there's a clear delineation of reviews that are posted by advanced access users, and that should help people to understand what's going on. So here it is happening in a recent tennis game, and you can see here pre-release review as a flair for that. So ultimately that side of things is really good. It does mean that if there is the option to pay money for early access to a game, that there actually will be reviews, or at least, there's the potential for reviews to be left. So that's really important for consumer information. There is, though, another change, and this is one that could potentially benefit the publishers more than it could benefit you and me. So advanced access time is now counted towards the 2-hour window for Steam refunds. The 14-day window starts from the formal launch date. If you play for more than 2 hours during the advanced access period, that will now count towards the conditions for Steam's refund policy, which of course is, no automatic refunds after 2 hours of play. Now, up until the current day, and this being formalized, it basically meant that enterprising players could speed through a game until they were bored and just refund it, because any play done before the official release time wouldn't actually count. So this is essentially Valve, closing a loophole that would let players get their money's worth from a game and then just refund it, right? Even though Valve could probably see they've played the game for 12 hours, the way that it actually tallied it up meant they could just get a refund, sort of go on with their day. So that's a closing of a loophole that absolutely is fair. That is a loophole that should be closed, even though it is surrounding a business practice that I think the vast majority of us think is a pretty damn bad thing. But it also does mean that if players find a broken game ahead of launch where they may be spending 2 hours in a server queue or something like that, or where the advanced access doesn't actually reflect the full game's quality, well, they're stuck with it after paying for the privilege. So yes, obviously the loophole needed to be closed to stop abuse, but this does feel a bit like an occasion where Steam's very blanket policies could actually go wrong and end up being pretty rubbish for some customers. And I suppose speaking of bad for customers, we got to check in with Frontier Developments and Elite Dangerous, because they have just instituted their own advanced access. It's a pretty interesting story. So, somebody at Frontier clearly is looking at Star Citizen and thinking, my god, that's a lot of money. Let's go have some of that. And we know this because they've basically just tried to implement that in Elite Dangerous, where users are very angry about the idea of paying for a spaceship ahead of its actual release. And again, in a game like Elite, so much of what you do is either grinding for a new ship that you want or grinding to upgrade your current ship, right? So ships absolutely matter massively. So in a blog post that's talking about pricing updates for the in-game premium currency, which is called ARCs, which can also be earned, the team also revealed that they will be selling ship variants starting with the Python Mark II. Now, those with the latest expansion can buy the Python Mark II variant in the shipyard in-game for credits, which is the non-premium currency, from the 7th of August. The 7th of August, if you want. You can buy the ship on the 7th of May using ARCs, the premium currency, and get 3 months of advanced access to it. And for those who don't have the expansion, they will only be able to purchase the Python Mark II using ARCs. So you either need the expansion, regular currency, and time, the expansion and premium currency, or patience and the premium currency. Obviously, in all cases, Frontier are, wanting you to pay more money to access the Python Mark II in general, and specifically to access it earlier. But then in addition to this, they've also announced they'll be selling pre-built ships from May, designed to come with a fresh paint job and all of the tools and equipment that you may need for a specific role. And here's how they describe it. We envision these pre-built ships to be a quicker way for newer players to get involved in the areas they've got the most interest in, or they say for existing players who are considering a new career path in game but do not have time to devote to a new build from scratch. Yeah, it's always that thing of, oh no, this microtransaction that gets you a bunch of in-game power that only exists for the benefit of new players. I mean, come on, we've been hearing that trite, time and time again. Ultimately, if you think that, just think of the bad incentives here in regards to grinding, and if your game is so unfriendly to new players, maybe that's a problem you should try to solve via, design and making your game a better game. Sort of grow the pie. Oh boy, yeah. And what they don't say though is how these will be paid for, but they did say that they will be in the store, and that the Python Mark II will also be launching with a pre-built package. So there you go. Of course, they're saying this all that, it's in service of a sort of a time-saving thing. Now, they then did a follow-up post and showcased 2 of these packages, and in each case, they feature at least one bit of gear that is explicitly framed as being present outside of the standard upgrade upgrade path. And again, I'll just explain here from their blog post. This bypasses the need to unlock the Guardian Gauss cannon from the Guardian technology broker and the subsequent trip to Ramta to modify it with the AGZ resistance effect. Now, you might not know what any of that means, but basically, you gotta get that weapon from the Guardian tech broker and then do other things. So this is going to be saving you a whole bunch of travel time. If any reputations need to be grinded, it'll save you time doing that. And for some players, this is absolutely too far. It is paying for power and is against the spirit of the game's progression and is blatant money grabbing, especially when they said this in 2019. As always with our optional additional purchases, ARCs can only be used to buy cosmetic game extras and will not be used to introduce or acquire pay-to-win purchases. I mean, I get that some people could say it's pay to get access to... No, it's pay to win, come on, it's obviously pay to win, in my view. Anyway, it just seems self-evident to me. I think the arguments here of, oh, it's just a time-saving tool, I think that's a pretty weak argument. Now, some other people may say that this is the sort of thing that cannot compete with a ship that somebody has, is a perfect meta design or whatever. But ultimately, I think that this is really bad. Do you know what's also bad for? Frontier, because they are simply not making money and they're losing more and more. It's actually pretty bad. So to explain that, here's just a quick little glance at their finances. You can see their revenue for the first half of 2024 and that's fiscal year 24 versus the first half of 23. And you can see in 23, their revenue was £57.1 million, but in 24, it's £47.7 million. So basically, it is down by almost 10 million. You can see their adjusted EBITDA losses, which went from a loss of 600 grand to a loss of 4.9 million. Their operating losses before restructuring, I mean, look at that, from a profit of 6.9 million to a loss there of 30.8 million. And we look at their cash balance, you can see that they went from having 42 million in the bank to 17.1 million in the bank. Now, obviously, that is disastrously bad. That is really, really brutal. They cannot go on like this. So, obviously, that's what's going on here. And we are, of course, in an era where studios are not really getting a massive amount of funding for new projects. Maybe the Jurassic World gravy train ain't panning out. Maybe Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo aren't really doing as well as they could be. Whatever's going on, it is really rough for Frontier. I mean, we've even seen like their Age of Sigmar strategy game. For a lot of people, they thought like, oh my god, this could be the dawn of war for the Age of Sigmar setting. A game that has plenty of laudable elements, but it's the usual Frontier thing, where they do a bunch of systems and, all of that, but then completely skimp on the content. So, I mean, if they're wondering why that game doesn't really seem to have been picked up by a lot of people, that might be part of the reason. Now, as for struggles with funding, that takes me into our next story, which is with Flaming Fowl Studios. So, Ironmarked is the latest title from them. It's a card-based RPG with co-op elements, and it's a team of vets from, say, Lionhead, right? Of course, Lionhead, better known in times gone by because I think, just kind of went into the big Microsoft grindy machine. But they have had successful games under their belt. They did a popular digital version of the Gloomhaven tabletop game, and on the 23rd of April, a demo for their new game, Ironmarked, appeared on Steam. People were able to play it, and also on the 23rd, studio management laid off more than half of the developers. Their headcount went from 30 down to 9, and they said they had to put Ironmarked on ice because there is simply no funding to continue right now. And speaking to Video Games Chronicle, the CEO Craig Oman basically talked about the state of the games industry. So here's the quote from him. "We've been working on the game for over a year," he explained. "We had a publisher, but they pulled out last year around June, and we've been self-funding since August. We've been pitching to publishers since then, but they all said the game looks great, the team looks great, but we're not signing anything right now." So that's basically the situation. They have been trying to get funding, but they just have not found anyone taking. And from here, we get into the grim details. So the remaining team of 9 are going to be self-publishing a much smaller scale project within the year because they're finding they're only really getting funding for small, like 100 grand plus projects or very large 20 to 40 million sort of grand budget games. And you might look at that and think, That's weird. And basically what you're finding is, see if it's a small project, like maybe a project with a 250 grand budget, 300 grand budget, 200, 150, whatever, that is not going to be, you know, like big ex-AAA veteran studios, because they don't, you know, they're not working for that amount of money. It's only going to be the more scrappy indies who are a lot more lean, who will be able to go on those smaller scale budgets. Like, as an example, we are one of those. You know, we are always... I mean, I don't want to give like exact numbers. We will do a full post-mortem on the Pale Beyond at some point. But like Pale Beyond was like under 300k, and that was a game that was a financial success, like for us and our publisher. But the way that works is, you know, we're only really slowly starting to see the benefits of that now because we're through our recoup. But basically, the point is, those smaller indie games, you know, we're really good at the sort of thing that we do, and that means we can be really effective at making sort of like narrative games with RPG elements. But if you're maybe looking at a 2, 3, 4 million budget, if you're trying to make a game maybe 3, 4, 5 million, you're basically just finding that is drying up in funding, and even in the smaller scale, things are drying up as well. As for those 20 to 40 million sort of budgets, I have no idea. That's completely the opposite end of the industry that we operate in. So, with all this happening then, why release the demo? And, well, I think there's one practical reason and an emotional one. In the practical side, wish lists and demo stats are actually really good for showing to a publisher, right? So that will help them pitch. And if they did have any biters, there'll certainly be things they will have learned from the demo players that can make the game better. But also, they worked on that game for ages, and this now means that the thing that they worked on is actually out there. And as for like why we are highlighting this, well, it's because it's a perfect example of the problems in the industry right now. The people at Flaming Fowl came out of the claps of Lionhead, a big AAA studio. They took their talent and skill, they showed it to publishers to get funding for projects. They had got funding for projects and delivered them successfully in the past. And when many people talk about the big AAA companies falling over and the layoffs, they think, oh, there'll be a golden age of indies. Well, there'll be a golden age of indies if lots of people are remortgaging their houses, which is not as nice a thing to do given current, current rates. Pretty rough. It is just harder to get money right now. So the people who've got the experience that would allow them to, deliver like a full indie title and, really run a studio like a true pro, that's rough. Projects are dying left, right, and center. This is one example of that. I can certainly say that it is absolutely true. Look around, friends in the industry, and there is a lot of anxiety, a lot right now. A lot of people who are basically, they're trying to push to the finish of their current project, and they're thinking, oh my god, what do we do afterwards? Because the one thing, even in relatively good times, that would kill a game studio is, fine, you release your game. And how long is it going to be until you see any meaningful amount of money from that game? Because the first thing you got to do is pay off your publisher recoup. The thing that traditionally has killed indies or just really caused a lot of struggle and basically caused cyclical layoffs from indies, or a sort of pervasive nature of everything being freelancers and contractors because you literally cannot guarantee jobs after a game comes out, even if it is decently successful, well, that is now just all the worse. You need a true hit to be able to self-fund something to the point where you can get another publisher going. So it's a pretty rough time. I think our indies will be coming from different places. I think you'll probably see, a lot of those AAA people with those skills, they will move to maybe other AAAs if they can get a job, but that's extremely competitive. Or they may even just move to another industry because the indie funding scene probably is not able to support people with that level of experience. And, just quite frankly, that by the time you're maybe 40 years old, 35 or whatever, you're thinking about putting kids through school, you're thinking about mortgages and stuff, you can't really work like how you did in your early 20s. That's the situation. It is absolutely grim. And the news stories that you see via video like this, only the tip of the iceberg. It is that rough. So that is it for today's video. Of course, one of the things that we do like to highlight in our monthly video game roundups is, games cropping up that are indies that you may not have heard of. So we'll continue to do that with, of course, next month. Other than that, though, I hope you enjoyed today's video. A lot of, to me anyway, fascinating topics, and we will be back very shortly with more. So if you want to support the show, check out today's sponsor. And other than that, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.